Welcome to the Dangerous Man Podcast, where we talk about how to become a better man, take responsibility for our mission, create value for others, and the many failures and lessons we've learned along the way. Stay dangerous. Welcome back, guys, to the Dangerous Man Podcast. This is your host, John Kostohris, joined by co-host
Adam Thooft. What's going on?
What is going on? Well, we're happy to be back for another episode of The Dangerous Man. And today we are discussing a topic that I've been reading in a new book. This is a good friend of mine gave me this book, and it's this little guy, actually. But this author is Og Mandino, and he's writing about himself. And it is an interesting book called The Choice. And the subtitle is A Surprising New Message of Hope for His Millions of Readers. And essentially, this author is writing this book with only a couple months left to live.
Oof.
As I understand in the intro. And basically, he's like, what memoirs would I write? And then he starts writing. It's pretty awesome.
That is cool.
But he just starts going back into his life. And we kind of pulled this theme out of living life on your own terms and just finding kind of an ability to dream, an ability to embrace our own creativity and kind of choosing the route for our life and in receiving our calling. I know those are all a bunch of heavy themes, you could say, but I think they're all really connected through this story that I'm going to tell in this book. And then this is the first few chapters of the book, essentially. But the author, Og Mandino, like I said, he's sitting there writing. But he jumps back into the story probably when he's like in his 30s or 40s, you could say. It's kind of hard to know for sure. But he is he's basically getting up to go golfing in the morning. And he's got some business buddies and some business partners he's going golfing with. And he does that apparently a lot on the weekends. And, Og is he has been this sales guy and this regional manager of this big insurance sales company, life insurance. And he's very successful and he's very high up and he's been there for a lot of years. And essentially in the story, he's kind of indisplaceable. He's very, he's really done a ton for the company, set a ton of records, leads the company in the region every year. And he's just super dependable, and he's had a lot of successes in his life. And this is an interesting story to tell on this podcast because Adam and I talk a lot about business and wanting to go and be successful and have big goals. And yet this story is a little bit different because this guy has some other realizations in the midst of living his life and kind of pursuing these goals and these dreams. And it's an interesting kind of twist to look at the other side of business, and that is kind of life at home with family and children, and kind of looking at what really matters in life, coming back to relationships. And so the story goes that he's waking up to go golfing with his buddies, and it's very early in the morning, maybe 6 a.m., and his two sons, one of them's like 12 years old, the other one's like 6 years old, and they're up super early to surprise their dad, and they come running to him, giving him hugs, and it's Father's Day. And they have these two letters, and these cards, essentially like Father's Day cards, and they give them to him. And he opens the first one, and it basically is like, "You're the greatest dad ever. Happy Father's Day." And he's just like sitting there, almost like going into his own head and like having this own experience where like he almost forgets his kids are there for a second, and it just hits him in the pit of his stomach. How like beautiful that is and how meaningful that is to him. And the other son gives him the same exact card in his own handwriting, maybe at 12 years old is a little more less scribbly, but "You're the greatest dad ever." And he looks at them and he hugs them. He's a little bit in shock, and they're kind of like, "Dad, what's wrong?" He's like, "Oh, this is such a great gift. Anyways, he hugs them and he goes off to stand outside to get picked up to play golf. And the garage door opens up and he walks out, and his two sons are standing in the doorway of the garage, like waving, and they're like, have a great game, Dad. And they're like, go win, like play an awesome game. And they're just like totally his cheerleaders. And they see the car roll up and he goes up to get picked up, and the guy hops out to pick him up to like open the back door of the car to throw the golf clubs in, and a few words are exchanged. He doesn't disclose what was said. And then the guy kind of has a strange look on his face and quickly gets back in the car and just closes up and drives off. And his dad's still standing there with his golf clubs. And his sons are like shock on their face. Like, wait, why didn't you get in the car and go play golf? And it's kind of unclear to me why he didn't go. But what is clear is he comes back inside and he starts to have breakfast with his kids and whatnot. And skipping ahead a little bit, he just has some realizations of, wow, like I could notice my kid. One of my sons was 12 years old, and it's like, wow, I don't think I've actually looked closely at his face. And I just, wow, he's grown up so much. When's the last time I've looked at him? Like, how many years have gone by before I really noticed this? And like, wow, his voice is starting to like mature and crack a little bit and get to that age. And he's becoming like more of a man, 12 years old. And, this realization of that. And it kind of leads to him basically, the next part of the story is he hops on a plane going to Boston, and he gets in front of the head of the company, because he's put his 2-week notice in. And so literally the head of the company basically schedules him a flight to go see him. He's like, and basically the head of the company wants to see you. It's like, yeah, I kind of expected that. So he hops on the plane and goes, and he's met by the head of the company and 2 other top guys, and they're having a conversation, and it's essentially like, why are you stepping down? Like, you have to explain this to me. Like, they go into all the years of success he's had and all the things he's done in his life and how he's just been amazing for the company and how he's set records, and nobody does it better, and everyone really loves him. He's a great manager, and this and that, and all the deals we've closed, and building up this whole emotional argument and all the stories, and essentially Og knows that when he's going in, he's gonna try to get talked out of quitting. And he's like, this time I'm actually holding my ground. I'm actually leaving. I'm actually wanting to spend this time with my family. Like, he's basically realized he's not been there for his family, and he's gone this way and that and done so much with this job and climbed the ladder, but and kind of scratched corporate's ass, you could say, with all of the things he does for him. But it was like his life, and now he's realizing that he's missed so much of his own kids' lives. And he doesn't want another second of it to go by now that he's had this big awakening. And so he's in the office in Boston with the head of the company, and they're trying to talk him out of it. And essentially, finally gets to the point where he's like, I'm quitting. And he's respectful about it. And he's discussing it with them, and they're like, look, we have this, like the second in command of this company just stepped down, and we're offering you this position. And it's like, and they're all like on the edge of their seat waiting for what he's going to say. Because in their minds, it's like, ding, like, they're like, dude, you're literally going to make over twice as much as you make now. And they're like almost thinking it's a no-brainer. He's like, this guy came here deciding he was going to quit and leave the company, but obviously he's just going to have to take this offer. It's so good.
It's a promotion.
Yeah, but like a freaking huge promotion.
The promotion.
Like, and I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because it literally goes in the book. He says, this is literally the position, the goal that I dreamt of when I started this career. And this is where I've always wanted to go here. And what he tells them next leaves everybody stunned. He says, I am going to become a writer. And their faces are just like blank. And they basically talk to him about like, all these details I won't get into, but like essentially he doesn't really have much in savings. They don't have a ton of money left. And they're basically like, and you're deciding to leave? Like, literally they're letting him know how ridiculous this is of him. And he's like, yep, I'm going to leave. And yeah, they end up buying this property in this beautiful place on top of a hill. And there's basically this old lighthouse that was literally built, and there's no ocean there. But the guy used to be like a captain at sea, the guy who built the house. And he literally turned the top of the lighthouse into like this beautiful leather chairs, like lighting, bookshelves, library, like a writing studio with a typewriter. And the husband had died, and it was the old wife selling the house and basically saying, "Well, we heard you're a writer, and we want you to have this house." And there's a crazy story of acquiring the house I won't get into, but he essentially ends up making that his writing studio in the footsteps of this other guy who'd written all these books there. Beautiful, beautiful scenery of Maine. You can see the mountains and Vermont and stuff. But yeah, that's the story of Og Mandino. And I'm only a few chapters in, but obviously, as I'm reading this, it's spawning this thought in me, Adam, and we can kind of get into some discussion here, but of what is going on in this story where he has this huge epiphany moment, aha moment, huge like midlife crisis where, he has been very successful, but now all of a sudden he realizes new things matter to him in a way he never realized before.
Yeah, it's a really big one. It's a lot to unpack, I think. Now, obviously, like, John, both you and me aren't, like, we've never really been in this kind of situation because we don't have, like, our own families, like wife and kids.
Yeah.
And it's like, we don't necessarily know what we would give up for them when we have them, kind of thing. So it's a little bit harder for us to exactly picture that just from I've been there, done that kind of thing, or I'm in that position, kind of thing. And maybe some of our friends that are in that position could shed a little bit more light on it. But for now, I think it's suffice to say that there was something that he saw that was incredibly important that he was missing when it comes to his kids. When it comes to, I miss them growing up, like, and I think it might even be something where it's like when you get to a midlife crisis, when you've had a very successful career, it might become like, okay, well, now I've gotten success, a lot of success, but like, how much more success do I need? And what am I doing it for? I think that's a big part of it, though. Like, is it just like, hey, he doesn't want to have like, I almost find it really interesting with the golf example, because I'm like, I really want to know what he said there, kind of thing. Like, what words were exchanged? Was he just like I imagine it being like, actually, I don't really want to go golfing. I want to spend the day with my kids.
Yeah.
Which I bet, like, probably at that point,
kind of what I think was happening.
That's probably something that was happening. And the other guy probably was taken aback because he probably thought that, like, this guy doesn't really spend time with his kids anyway because he doesn't value that. So, like, that coming out of his mouth would be like, what?
Yeah, he was probably a little peeved,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, obviously, like, if I drove to your house to pick you up to go do something and you're like, actually, I'm going to do something else, you might be a little angry.
We had plans, man.
Yeah.
What the heck, bro?
Yeah. So, like, some of that's, like, understandable, but at the same time, it's like, sometimes I also think, like, maybe he was like, I actually want to spend time with my kids today. And maybe that other guy was like, well, shit, I have kids.
Whoa. That's a bomb, dude.
Yeah. So, like, we don't know what was that said there, but, like, yeah, that's just kind of what my initial thoughts of it are, and, like, why, like, how much success do you want, kind of thing, and for what reason, kind of thing. And
it's a little bit of a under the hood kind of episode where we're looking at motivation, we're looking at what's going on in the heart. And I will say this, Adam, like, I don't think the going after goals and success in any way has to take away from the deeper parts of our lives and relationships.
Yeah.
If anything, it just, we make choices and commitments along the way based on what our priorities are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our priorities are set in stone based off our vision for where we feel called to go in our lives.
Yeah.
And I'll keep my kind of visionary concept at that. But maybe a question I could ask from that is, where is the main character in this story, Og? What is his life vision? What has he decided are his kind of bigger goals and purposes? So you have your goals and purpose, but there's the things that go with it, which are the people and the family and kind of the calling of how you're supposed to be a man and provide in that space, being like this theme of a king, right?
Yeah.
And this is something I'd love to get into from another book, but this theme of we are all kings of a kingdom that we're given, and we're meant to be, one word I like is a steward, but we're supposed to take care of rule those kingdoms justly and with strength.
Yeah.
And the kingdom could be as simple as, I have my family and I have my kids, I have my business, I have my house, whatever you're in control of and you've been given authority over of essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And so the deeper question really there that I want to toss for us to discuss is what has he made his priorities? Does he realize he's a king? And has he made a way to balance kind of, this is my career and this is how I'm going to provide? Does that job fit into his calling as a king, or did he lose sight of that? And anything in between.
I mean, I think the reason why he quit was because it didn't make sense for his calling. He said, I'm going to become a writer, because he realized, actually, that's what I should do. And that does kind of ask the question, it's why quit a job? Why do people quit jobs? This is kind of taking a little bit more abstract view of it, of why do people quit jobs at all? And I'm sure a lot of people can think of answers off the top of their head and be like, oh, well, my boss sucks, I don't get paid enough, blah, 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 blah. But it's
yeah, okay,
so your boss sucks for a reason. And if you don't get paid enough, obviously you feel like you're working harder than the amount of money that ends up in your bank account. So it's well, there's other reasons to quit jobs. And I think obviously with this job that Og is quitting, it's not because of the money. I'm sure he's making plenty of money. Sounds like he's making plenty of money.
Oh yeah.
It's not necessarily about the people. He was planning on going golfing and doing that kind of stuff.
Staying plugged in with that community.
Staying plugged in with those people. So it's not oh, my boss sucks, I'm not making enough money. So there has to be something a little bit deeper than that for the reason why he quit. And obviously, in this story, it looks like a good portion of it is his family.
Yeah.
But what other motivations abstractly are reasons to quit a job?
Yeah.
I've definitely quit jobs before. I've never been fired, which is great. I've quit a lot though of jobs.
I'm gonna read something off the back there on piggying off what you're saying, and one of the cool things about him becoming a writer is he's really kind of gone after this passion of inspiring people and becoming a very prominent self-help author, and a very sought after public speaker. But kind of what he hinges on in this book that I'm sure he'll get more into, that this kind of opening story hits, is essentially he kind of reveals one of the most precious commodities of all, which is what he defines as the freedom of choice.
Oh.
And the freedom of choice is kind of, as he puts it, is a key to a freer, richer future. And kind of love being a prominent part of that, which I'm sure is, obviously with his family and relationships being at that. But, and so, why would you leave a job? What are his deeper motives of why he even got into his career, and why did he suddenly pivot so hard when he, I think he realized it wasn't aligned with where he wanted to go. And it was this is something I was talking to a good friend of mine, Dominique, about, Adam. And Dom was saying when when these big tops, he played in the NFL and he says, yeah, like when Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, when they're getting paid the kind of money they get paid, millions and millions of dollars in a contract, like they're getting paid that when that phone rings from anyone in their organization, the organization of, the Patriots, he's picking that phone up.
Well, now the Buccaneers, but yeah.
Right now the Buccaneers. But, most of his career was the Patriots. So,
yeah.
Essentially, though, he is, right, if he's on vacation, if he's with his family, if he's at dinner, if he's in the movie theater, you name it, he's getting paid that kind of money to be always on. And, and I know my buddy was telling me that some other people in big, $1 million contract to be a higher up at a company. And it's the same thing. They're getting paid when that phone rings, wherever they are, they're picking the phone up. That's why they get paid that money. And that's obviously like, if we're hinging on this idea of the freedom of choice here, like that's not really living life on your terms.
Mm-hmm.
You agreed to it, sure. But like, and I guess there's a choice there, but I think what the author's realizing is I don't have the freedom to really commit to what really matters, which is like my greater purpose is with my people, with my family. And that's personally why I love being an entrepreneur so much is, and I think a lot of the Generation Y, I was listening to a podcast about this, but kind of Generation Y, ages 18 through, 29 years old right now. It's super popular for them to approach work with the mindset of, I want this to be able to like contribute towards more freedom and a lifestyle that I want to be able to have on my terms.
Yeah.
And a lot of the generations before us, it really wasn't about that.
Mm-hmm.
Work was, if you talk to like my parents' generation or even millennials, maybe not everyone applies to this. Okay.
It'd be like older millennials.
Yeah. And boomers and whatnot, it was probably more of
Gen X.
Yeah. Those are exactly. Those are kind of what I'm thinking about, but they would probably define the purpose of work more like, oh, like this is what needs to get done. And this is just how you're supposed to live. And I need to do what I got to do. More of a duty purpose, which I think is profound in its own right. But it wasn't like, how can I be creative to have life on my terms? It was, this is the way the world works and I just do it.
Yeah.
And like my generation's realizing I can run a company from my phone in the palm of my hand.
Yeah.
And have freedom.
Yeah. And
I have choices and options because there's technology now.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is interesting that to kind of, I think the author here, I'll open this up for some of your thoughts too here, Adam. What's kind of, isn't that interesting where he's maybe having a realization of, I want life more on my terms.
Yeah, I think it might even be that like he didn't even choose the place that he was at. He just kind of found himself there. He just kind of moving from one thing to the next. Like, oh, well, this is the next step. I need to work hard here so I can keep going. And then he just kept working hard and figuring stuff out as he went along. And he was in the right situations and made the most of what he had and decided to do the hard things and be disciplined and learn and do all those things to work his way up. But he was just kind of following a path, not necessarily like kind of knowing what the path looked like, but not necessarily knowing fully like where it would go and how it would affect everything. So it might have just been, oh, I'm here now, I guess. And I think even growing up in like school, you don't necessarily think about like the purpose of school when you're in it. You're like, oh, I have to do this, otherwise I'm going to get grounded and my parents are going to get mad at me if I don't get grades or do my homework. Like, I don't actually like doing this, but I will because I don't want my parents to be mad at me.
Right.
So it's not like, oh, I'm in high school now. It's like, oh, I chose to go to high school. It's like, no, I just found myself here.
This is how the world works for you, bud. Little high schooler.
And like, obviously, like high schoolers don't necessarily have a choice.
Totally.
In that. But like when you become an adult, it's like, it becomes more of a choice, but because you grew up through the school system, it can potentially be like, hey, okay, after high school, clearly go to college. After college, get a job, get married, do all this stuff. That's the normal thing you do. And then I think at some point people realize, wait, what is this about? And that's when like midlife crisis happen for a lot of people, because actually start thinking about what was this all for.
Yeah.
And I think
that's exactly kind of the realization I think the author's having here.
Yeah. That's why I said it's like, I don't know if he necessarily chose where he got to in that point. He just kind of did the next thing that made sense.
Yeah. And, you know, respect, man, for him being able to pivot like that, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, he stood up to some big, powerful people and was like, hey, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to be with my family more. And he's like willing to share these things with them. And they're kind of like, whoa, who is this guy? What are you doing, man? But yeah, you know, it's interesting for people that aren't interested in entrepreneurism. Like, I know that's my particular passion, Adam's passion. But it's are you going with the flow? Are you following the 98%? Or are you thinking for yourself? Are you making your own choices? And does the choice that you're making, you know, I'm thinking particularly here within career or work, or just your mission, how you're really living your life to make a difference is kind of what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
Like, have you sat down and thought about this?
Mm-hmm.
Have you been inspired by some reflection?
Yeah.
By maybe stories of others? Has that gotten your heart stirring a little bit for who you are called to be?
Yeah.
You know, if you're religious, we hinge really heavily on, you know, the God putting it on our hearts to go out and do something with our lives that impacts others and brings value to other people's lives in it. And if you want to put different language to that, you know, coming back to just the final thoughts here of, you know, making choices that align with that higher calling. Or if it's just you've sat down and like, this is where I want to go. This is what I really feel that I'm supposed to do or what I want to do. And taking that $1 million contract is great and all, but is getting locked away like that. And all of a sudden you belong to someone else's time and you're living life on their terms now. And I think it is interesting to have the kind of freedom that we want and to be able to go and do the things we want, we have to be willing to break away from the crowd and make some choices. And so I think what I'm really getting at here at essence is, if you haven't been intentional with how you're living your life and you find yourself like Og, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, now I am going to make a choice and I'm going to make this pivot because I have just been, you know, all the things Adam was mentioning, good things, working hard, discipline and whatnot. So those are some of my final thoughts, but if you want to kind of wrap that up, Adam.
Yeah, I think it's good to know where you're going and what you're doing it for, and not just going from one thing to the next. I've definitely found myself doing that a decent amount in my life where it's like, oh, well, this is the next thing that makes sense. This is the next thing that makes sense. And I think it's very important to look at those different areas in your life. And maybe we'll have another episode where we kind of go into that more, where it's like, okay, what kinds of lives, what kind of parts of your life you're looking at. This is kind of more of an abstract view of like, wow, like, have you actually really thought about like what's the meaning? What's your calling? What are you like meant to do? Or is it just kind of bouncing from one thing to the next, like a pinball machine?
Right.
And like, maybe you're doing lots of great things, but like, are you doing them for the right reasons?
Well, guys, we drop episodes every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So subscribe so you never miss out and stay connected to the movement. Adam and I are really passionate about helping more men become dangerous and strong men. And so we just ask that if this was valuable to you, that you share it with somebody. You've been listening to the Dangerous Man Podcast. Join us next time. Until then,
stay dangerous.